All right, Team Rising is here for their election. They're going to try and make sense of what just happened and to discuss whether either the Dems or the GOP have learned any lessons at all, or should they?
Or should they? Yeah, that's the real question. They won't. That's spoiler alert. All right, with us, our Democratic strategist, council member at large of Montgomery County, Will Jawando, and co-host of the Realignment podcast, Marshall Kosloff. So great to see both of you guys.
Good to see you guys.
Thanks for having us.
So let me just lay out what we know at this point, because obviously the results are coming in or trickling in. I don't know how they're coming in. But essentially, it looks like Joe Biden has an edge in Nevada, an edge in Wisconsin, an edge in Michigan, and potentially a path in Pennsylvania. Georgia, also a little bit of a question mark. So essentially, he looks like he's in position to do what he needs to do to win, although it is still very much unclear at this point. However, Will, this was not the race or the election or the night or anything that Democrats were hoping to have. It was not what was reflected in the polls. It's not going to be that kind of mandate and overwhelming landslide, not to mention looks likely that the Senate is going to stay in Republican hands. What is your overall sense of how things went? What went well and what went, frankly, poorly for Democrats last night, ultimately?
Yeah, well, thank you, Crystal and Sagar. Good to see you both.
Always.
Look, as I was saying earlier to my wife, I went to bed angrier and woke up happier. Perspective cures all things. It tends to, and I think this election will be one where we look back and say, how did Hillary Clinton lose and how did Joe Biden win? And if you look at what he did, he made progress. He made progress in suburban white voters. Even in the states that he didn't win, he made significant progress with some of those voters. You see the fact that you just mentioned Georgia, which, thanks to Stacey Abrams, we made a lot of progress down there. The fact that he's even hanging on there, the fact that he's been so close in some of these southern states. Look, he's going to probably hold Michigan, Wisconsin. He got Nevada and Arizona. A Democrat hasn't won in Arizona in a very long time. So I think it's going to be a mixed bag. But as with Joe Biden during the primary, you all know when you've had me on, he has a slow, methodical. They stuck to their game plan, and they're going to win by millions and millions of votes. The popular vote's going to be way higher. And so I think part of this is going to be another indictment of the Electoral College. But certainly Trump did better than expected. But I think it's going to be a win. It's going to be a slow, methodical, hold-on Joe Biden win. And then we'll see what comes in the Senate. I think the chances are less likely there.
Yeah, certainly interesting. I mean, Marshall, so there's a lot of talk right now. I'll admit, I'm ecstatic. Zapata County, down in Texas, went for Trump, 95% Hispanic. He's winning 47% in Starr County, one of the poorest districts in the entire country, overwhelmingly won Latinos in Florida. But we can't overlearn that lesson because at the end of the day, I mean, the guy still looks like he's probably going to lose. What do you think that the right message and lessons for the Republican Party are coming out of this election so far, as we know it right now?
Yeah, the Republican Party has to look at what happened in Florida and what happened in those Hispanic districts in Texas. When Republicans are able to actually improve significantly their margins with Hispanic voters, it basically makes it impossible for Democrats to win in certain places. So, for example, with Trump's sort of more populist framing of the GOP, that's something that actually resonates very well with those Hispanic voters. And what's also fascinating is that if we look at the way the sort of past 4 years went down with immigration policy, that was an area where President Trump's immigration stand really hurt him with white suburban voters, the sort of Biden Republicans who it seems like are going to pull us out for him. But if you're actually looking at these Hispanic voters, they weren't voting on that issue whatsoever. So Republicans are really stuck between a rock and a hard place when it comes to sort of these immigration policy issues. They're going to have to find a way to sort of reconcile Trump's sort of immigration stand that's popular with the white working class, that is sort of fine enough of Hispanic voters, but also doesn't turn off those like white suburban voters to the same degree.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Let me challenge you a little bit because, look, I think it looks like Joe Biden did enough to pull this thing off. It's embarrassing. Donald Trump, an incumbent president, losing. Anytime an incumbent president loses, I mean, that's a major upset. And it looks like once everything is counted, it may even be a pretty clear Electoral College victory. However, how do you reconcile the fact that Donald Trump actually picked up ground with every single demographic group except for white men? the Democratic Party is increasingly aligning itself around an affluent demographic. And that's not, the historic Democratic Party conception. It's supposed to be party of the people, right? It's supposed to be party of the working class and the middle class, working America. It's increasingly not that. What do you make of that trend?
Well, I think two things. In lies, I would say in one word, lies. I think, we have never seen a president, a political figure in this country lie to the extent that Donald Trump has. And I think, unfortunately, because of social media, because of Facebook, because of Twitter, those lies are amplified because of foreign interference. And you have large swaths of people that just are not making decisions based on facts.
But Will, I want to challenge you on that, because frankly, I find it a little classist, because you're saying basically like, white suburbanites were able to figure this out, but the working class wasn't able to. Donald Trump picked up significant ground, in particular with black men. What is the appeal? What is going on there? What do Democrats need to learn and try to turn this thing around so they don't continue to lose ground?
Sure. There's always been black men that vote Republican for economic interests. 90, when this is all said and done, if you look at previous presidents, I think Ronald Reagan got 13% of black men. I think that argument by the media is totally overblown, and it's really insulting, because to act like everyone's a monolith and you can't have a conservative view and want to vote for economic interests just because you're a black man has always been ridiculous to me. We don't do it with the Latino community, where there have been pickups and which is very diverse as well. So I think the bottom line here is that, of course, there are lessons. The second point I was going to make was to agree with you. The Democratic populist message that is coming from the left and is something that we need to double down on. And I think you've seen Biden try to do some of that and split the baby a little bit. I think how he governs and what he pushes, regardless of the Senate control, is going to determine these younger Latino voters in the Southwest and Arizona. I think with the Latino vote, how does he push that? Who do people come to him? What issues does he pursue? In the black community, same thing. I think with non-college educated whites, I think that populist message is going to be important too. So we're going to have to see. I agree with you that there's something there. But to say that this is a defeat or a loss or not a positive movement for the Democrats, I think that's overblown as well.
Yeah. Marshall, let me ask you on this one. So if Donald Trump does end up losing, and again, I think he'll lose by a few percentage points of popular vote, 3, 4, several million votes, as Will points out, probably will end up likely being a very clear electoral college victory for Joe Biden. What lessons do you think the Republican Party is actually going to take from that? What do you think that the post-Trump era looks like in the Republican Party? Because as much enthusiasm as there might be about the rising Latino vote in Texas for Republicans and in Florida for Republicans, do you actually think that the heir apparents in the Republican Party who are likely to take it over after Donald Trump understand that appeal or are likely to do what they need to hold on to those coalitions?
Yeah, thanks for bracketing that into understand the appeal, but sort of are they then willing to do what needs to be done there? Because I think Republican politicians definitely understand, at least rhetorically, the idea that the GOP's base is increasingly working class, that this increasingly isn't a party that's defined by sort of country club, Eisenhower Republicans, and much more is about appealing to the sort of culturally conservative, often working class voters, especially of Hispanics. But the real question is what is willing to be done, and whether or not that's sort of a rhetorical point. What I sort of think we're going to sort of see happen, and this is sort of the pessimistic take, is we're going to see a lot of rhetoric. Because the other thing that should be added to the discussion about whether or not populism is going to sort of be effective is what happened in Florida is the whole socialism sucks message was actually pretty effective. And that's not a message that I was particularly excited about, because I think in many ways, Joe Biden obviously isn't a socialist. So if we care about policy, we should try to be accurate of what's sort of going on there. But if you're a GOP politician, there's a way that you could look at last night's results and say the following. You could say, hey, actually we could say socialism sucks and we could say working class a lot. And actually there will be, 20, 30% of minority communities who will turn out for that, especially as the Democratic Party is increasingly suburban the way you put it.
That's such an important point, Marshall. And I want to ask you one more follow-up on that, which is that increasingly it looks like Joe Biden could have the White House and the GOP could keep the Senate. Now, in my view, they're going to repeat the 2010 obstruction policy last time around and bring back make austerity politics great again, which is going to kill me in terms of covering it. But isn't that exactly like we're learning the wrong lesson, which is that there is nobody. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that Zapata County, where Trump won that county and where John Cornyn lost, was not because of austerity politics, and yet that seems the way that they're likely to go if they keep the Senate.
100%. Resetting. We sort of talk about whether or not Republicans are going to bring things back to 2015 after Trump. To your point, it seems like people are trying to reset 2010, sort of the focus on austerity politics, lots of talk about the debt. We're going to see that happen again. And that's a really depressing outcome for all of us, I think, because it's very clear that that's not the message that's going to sort of be effective there. And there's a lot of sort of gloating on Twitter about sort of Republicans doing better with the working class. But we should also recognize that those like Hispanic voters are not going to turn out for Republicans if you're just giving Mitt Romney politics for them. So if you just sort of say, hey, we're the party of the working class, insert like tax cut reference, insert deregulation reference, insert like don't we care about the national debt, that's not going to sort of be there. So that's the real sort of question for Republicans and for the Democratic Party moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's right. And the other thing I'd point out about both Texas and Florida, those are states where Republicans have spent, not just with Donald Trump, but have spent a lot of years messaging and organizing in Latino communities with politicians who have outperformed in those communities versus what Republicans normally do nationwide. All right, guys, stick with us. We want to get more from you right after this.